Hello and welcome to Pro Modeler. I'm Philip Flory and one of this month's builds we're going to be doing the Academy 148 scale AH-64 Apache. One of the references we're going to be using, I'm going to be using the lock-on data file book actually on the Apache, which is quite handy because it's got nice detailed pictures all the way through. Details will be on the forum about getting hold of that and where to get them. The kit itself, as you would expect, it's a helicopter, so it's going to be slightly different, i.e. we're going to get raised rivets and things like that. Still bagged, haven't touched it. Cockpit detail doesn't look too bad. Obviously it's on a par with the AH-64A kit. There again, we're going to be working with this one. Perhaps at a later date we can come back and have a go at the AH-64A and compare the two. As I say, recessed panel lines all throughout the kit, which is very nice, and then obviously we've got raised details for the rivets. Now when you're sanding and filling, we're going to have to be a bit careful because we don't want to totally destroy them. The decals for it, to be honest, a bit basic. We'll probably change those anyway. Okay, so if we have a quick look through all the bags and just see what we've got to start with. As I said before, it's recessed panel lines with raised details. Now, one of the main problems with those, we've got a few little loose bits in the bag. One of the main problems with those is obviously your rivets. Now, two ways of doing this, to be honest, right? We can either sand all this off and get the sandpaper out and some buffing sponges and bits and pieces, take them all off and re-rivet it, okay? Or we can basically try and avoid it like the plague and just re-rivet where we have to. Now, fors and against. Obviously, with a wash, you know me, I like the washes and things like that, you're not going to get it to work on raised rivets. But in reality, obviously, if you've actually been up to an Apache, you'll know they are completely rough. It's like go around with it like braille. It's full of rivets all over it and they are raised. So to keep it authentic, we're going to try and keep the raised rivets. Now, obviously they're very small, very hard to do. So hopefully by just using a pin, bits and pieces, perhaps a points wheel, we can go along and we can actually put them back in where we do obliterate them. It's a complex shape in the way it's going to go together, but hopefully doing a lot of dry fitting, things like that, will be okay. So the kit itself is quite nicely detailed. It's showing its age, obviously, but it's all basically there. As I say, it is a mixture of the actual panels are recessed, so we'll be okay with that. The gun, in all honesty, it's such a focal point on the Apache when you see it. It's a bit disappointing. It's so basically molded, but you can't have everything. Nice touch. We've got rubber wheels, so no more painting wheels. The clear part section is the sort of standard way that they work with these, where you'll get the one piece running down one side. That out. As you say, we've got the clear part, so you have your canopy there, and then obviously the two doors can open on the other side. We'll obviously do it open, and we're going to try and put as much detail as we can in there. Basically, the kit itself, the standard kit, you're going to get these two bits. The add-on bit here basically gives you the new packs on the sides that bolt to the side of the Apache. They're slightly bigger, and obviously the fire control millimeter radar that sits on top, which obviously is the way to identify the longbow Apache, if you like, or the upgraded version. Couple of stingers on the wingtips. Obviously you're going to have to check your references, and it all depends on where you're actually going to build it. If you're going to do it as sort of a Gulf War type thing, then obviously you can backdate this kit a little bit. Engines, quite nice, nothing special. Obviously we're going to be doing this one with Hellfires, and the Hellfires are, well, as I say, nothing special either. The kit itself isn't over the top, but helicopters don't tend to be very detailed. They tend to be big, chunky lumps that fly around the battlefield and get the job done. So really, in a way, what you don't get with detail, we can make up with weathering. And I'm going to show you a couple of things with the weathering to sort of really bring it out. And obviously I've got the book here. And when you flick through it and you look at actually obviously the ones in the desert, the way they're actually maintained and cleaned, see how well you can see these, but obviously it's buckets of water are chucked over them and washed out to get the sound out, and obviously that really adds to the weathering, and obviously anti-corrosion things, sand, bits and pieces like that. So with this one we're actually going to do quite a lot of the actual weathering to it. To sort of give it that sort of heavy, worn look. Okay, so we've got some things off. We've got the main fuselage sections off the sprue. We've got the seats out here. We've put together the instrument panel. Very, very straightforward. Basically, we've got parts E32 and E31 are the HUD covers here, and then we've got the main part back here, which is C38, and then C26 is the actual viewfinder, the two-handle thing. Stick your old head in. Okay, we've got the back plate there. Cockpit, tidied it all up, little tiny bits of flash around. I don't know if you can see, we've got another little bit just in here, so all we've literally done is just running a a blade along it and then a quick sand off. Now the beauty with obviously doing attack helicopters, the Apaches and things like that, they're usually black inside and green outside. That's it. Very simple to do. But obviously we're going to be doing things with weathering, obviously bleaching, darkening, things like that afterwards. But from our point of view, they're quite nicely done. They tend to be very dusty on the inside, as helicopters do. Versus actually normal aircraft, because they're working in dusty conditions, and obviously all that dirt that the crew have on them from obviously walking across sandy areas, anything like that, dirt does get in. So what we're going to do is basically going to put down a coat of black, and then we're going to lighten the shade of the black, and we're going to come back and just pick out some areas, just give it some tonal, and then we're going to use the light wash just to bring it all really to life. So what we're going to do, got the airbrush all out and we're working. We're running at 25 psi. Got some black paint here. This is just our 057, which is our flat black from Model Air. We just check our flow, and then all we're going to do, we're going to do the sides as we normally do, so the cockpit inside walls like that, and then we're going to do, obviously you don't have to go too overboard with your black on the inside of the cockpit, because it really doesn't go that far. And then the actual cockpit area itself. You may find if you're using this one, which is the Academy kit, that it's a little bit of the release gel that we were talking about on previous kits. Obviously this one is no exception, and it had to have a little wash just before we started. So literally I just put it in some fairy liquid, give it a swill around, everything else like that, bit of a wipe over with a soft brush, get it out, rinse it thoroughly, let it dry, and then to speed things up, from my point of view, I just whipped the hairdryer completely all over it and gave it a blow around with a compressor. But obviously you could just leave it there overnight to totally dry. Okay, so just make sure we've done all those edges and we're all happy with that cockpit tub, and I'll get the rest of the other bits all sprayed up. Okay, so the black parts are all dry now. Now what we want to do is recreate that sort of dusty, worn look that the actual aircraft get inside. So what we're going to do, we've got some XF19, which is sort of the lightest grey they sort of do. It's the sky grey from Tamiya, but any light grey will do. We don't want to go white because we don't want to stark contrast, but what we're trying to do is dull this down. Now make sure your brush is basically totally dry. Okay, we're going to flick around absolutely everywhere with it. Now obviously by using it grey like this, we just bring it in a little tighter. By using the grey like this, what it actually does, it does two things. One, obviously it's going to make the instrument panel all stand out a lot better. Secondly, it's going to give everything a little bit of a cutback, if you like. It's not going to be so stark because obviously we've got the grey going over the top, and the grey will just help give it that little dusty look. Okay, so what we want to do is just work it in absolutely everywhere, and when your brush is basically out, reload up and then knock almost all of it over, because we don't want to have any little brush marks in this anywhere. We literally just want to, just bring this all to life, and it's going to be one of those awkward things you're not going to see too well on the camera, I think. But literally just go absolutely everywhere with it, just like so. Then what we can do, we can pop around then with obviously silvers and things like that to actually bring the instruments, if you like, completely out. But this will just start to give it that little dusty look we're trying to do. So the same here, we've got the coving that goes over the top of the rear instrument panel, the pilot, because don't forget, obviously the pilot sits behind the gunner on the actual Apache. So the same thing, we're just going to literally flicking it all over and just dusting with our dry brushing everywhere. So we're just taking the edge, if you like, off of the actual the black by lightening it up. Now obviously you could go round now and obviously with a little bit of grey mixed with your black and make lighter panels and so forth and things like that. I'm going to go around and do it by dry brushing, and then what we're going to do is use the light wash, smear it over everything in there and then get it all off, and what's left will give us that nice little dusty look, and then we can go around then and then dry brush on top of the wash again, and then hopefully it will bring it all out to life. And then as the final thing, we'll go around and pick out all the little instruments. Okay, so as you can see, we've got the light wash on the go, so we're just getting that everywhere that we need to. So obviously I've done the back here and obviously the tops of the instrument panels. Now one thing I did notice, it started to separate, and when I shook it, it went a little bit, I don't know, like gone off milk. Okay, obviously this one's been standing around in direct sunlight by my mistake because I left it actually on the windowsill. It doesn't harm it. Literally half a drop of dishwater soap in there will re-break it down and re-get it going. It's gone a little bit bubbly, to be honest, because there was only a tiny bit in the bottom, and this is all bubbles. But the beauty is with the bubbles, they work very, very well for doing this type of dusty thing. And you've probably seen me do that little trick with instrument panels, where you get the demarcation lines between each bank of obviously instruments. Beautiful. If you use the actual bubbles, forget using the wash, use the bubbles, because the bubbles get in there twice as good as the wash does on its own. So we're just going to give that a thing, and we're going to go on the instruments as well on that one. And obviously we'll do the instrument panel in here as well. But what will happen is it will just give it that little dusty like look, if you like, over like that. So now we're going to have to let that dry. Obviously we just do down the sides anywhere that's going to show on the cockpit as well. Just give it a dusty look. Now this is the thing, when you're taking this off, it all depends. You can leave it totally on there, or you can take it off or leave a little bit, just as you do your normal wash. But there we go, that's that bit done. So we need a little bit of drying time on there. Okay, wash on and dry, as you can probably see around. So what we're going to do to start with, we're not going to moisten the cloth, just get rid of anything big, because you never know it's going to come off. Not come off brilliant. We're going to wet it a bit, rub it on the hand, get rid of most of the moisture. Now obviously we don't want to rub all this off because we want it to stay. So what we're doing, any blobs you've got, we'll get rid of those. Okay, and then move around all your other areas and just give it that sort of dusty, worn look. Now don't panic at the moment because it won't look particularly good, but by the time we get the cockpit in there and the other bits all filling it up, it will look okay. If you have got the mud colour and you're going to be really picky, if you like, go around and do it perfect, you could add a bit of mud to this as well, and it will give you that sort of dirtier, dusty look, if you like. Okay, same thing on the old panels. Now obviously this rear one, I'm going to clean it off quite a lot back up here, but if we bring you in a bit you'll see more. There we go. Okay, so as you can see we're just rubbing this one off quite a bit. Obviously it's going to stay in those grooves, but that's because we want it to do that, because we want it to give it that sort of, it's got dust in there type thing. Okay, and in any little corners. Now don't panic if it's too dark, if you're suddenly thinking, oh god, look, I've ruined it, because what we can do is, if you get any little areas, perhaps like in this corner here, come along with some dark wash, give it a drop in there, the capillary will zip around and do all its bit, and then just leave it. Don't even contemplate touching it again. You won't have to anyway. Okay, instrument panels, same things. We're just going to give them a rub over, and if you wanted to, you could probably get away with actually never actually physically dry brushing them anymore, because it really does bring them all to life. You can see these rear ones down here. It does do quite a good job on that. Obviously I like to use it because it does those nice, the demarcations on the panels. And obviously when you see them in real life, they do have them. Okay, perhaps we're over accentuating it just a little bit, not quite as strong as this, but it certainly serves the purpose from the model point of view. Obviously, when you're dealing with a scale effect like this, you need it to be a little bit stronger than it is in real life. A bit like when you look at sort of models and cockpits, some things, you compare them to the real thing, they're never quite as strong. But you need certain areas like instrument panels, seats are a good one, that need to stand out and be bright and be very detailed, even if in reality you can't really see them. Panel line washes are a classic. How many times you've been to an air show, around a museum, you look at the aircraft, okay? Two things you're going to notice immediately when you look at them. Firstly, it's got chunks, dents, bangs all out of them everywhere. Nothing really lines up as well, unless you're talking it's a new fighter, especially old stuff. They have a hard life. They really do go through it. But obviously from the modelling point of view, we can't put those on because we'll never get them in that smaller scale. So what we do is basically trick the eye and the mind, if you like. So by adding panel lines and bits and pieces like that to the model, it breaks it up, it gives it a more sort of 3D shape, so it doesn't look so much like a lump sort of sat there of plastic, and that's really what we're doing. So in a small way, when we're doing cockpits like this, we're just accentuating what we want your eye to be drawn to. So obviously we want to have nice clear glass so you can see in there. Obviously reality is, I think we've all seen it, Perspex cracks, it gets very, very dirty, and they are never totally clear if you look through a cockpit. But from a modelling point of view, you need it to be clear to show off your details. So if I'm making any sense at all, you're luckier than I am. Okay, so we're just going to go around there. Okay, so this instrument thing here down the side, I'm very happy with it as it is and would be inclined to leave it just like that. Now, just for a bit of a thing, we're just going to line up and see how we're all going to sit in here. So it's going to sit in just like that, and as I say, it gives it that nice dusty, worn look. By the time we picked out a little bit of colour and we've gone round it, it should really bring it all to life. Now the other thing we can also do, as we were saying, if you wanted to now, you could go round, tiny bit of silver, flat aluminium works perfect, XF16 for Tamiya, and just literally dry brush the little details, but don't be in there sort of scrubbing away, literally just gently brush just to bring all the details out. I'm not going to bother for these side ones because I'm quite happy with that, but I am going to do it with the instrument panel to bring that to life. So obviously, me being me, I'm actually out of XF16 Tamiya, so I'm going to use Citadel paints and I'm going to use their chainmail. Now obviously if you've been with me for a while, you'll know that I quite like this stuff. It's very nice for hand painting and it's very nice for spraying as long as you get it thin enough. So I am sort of a convert and I've moved away from using things like the Valero metals. Okay, so here we got the cockpit here. So all we're going to do, nice light passes all over, literally just to bring it to life. Now in here in the middle we're going to have a screen just down there. So all we're going to do, well you can see that, let's bring you in a bit more, we'll lose that. Okay, there we go, you see. So we've got that working there, and obviously we're just about to do the same with this one here. As I say, this one's got some of the light wash around there, so we can just bring these out. Now the cockpit isn't perfect, and obviously from the point of view of what you could do, you could use photo etch in here. Basically if it says it's going to fit for the Hasegawa, it's going to fit in here, although they do the resin cockpit set for the Hasegawa kit, but I don't know if it will fit in this particular one. I haven't tried it. Okay, so what we'll do, we're just going to do a little bit of scuffing on the floor. Let me just bring you out a bit, there we go. We're going to do a bit of scuffing on the floor where the old feet go, just to bring that to life. It's the same thing, we're just brushing down. And okay, I'm going to make just a couple of little light passes over the instrument panels just to highlight any little areas, just like that. And we're just going to do that in the back there, a bit of silver. And there we go, a bit of a rub on the side walls, because obviously, you know, legs kicking off paint, scraping down, usual thing, just like that. So okay, this back is still a little too dark for my liking, so we're going to give it another rub round and see if we can tone it just down a little bit. If it's too dark, if it's too light, sorry, obviously I'm going to go around and I'm going to try and get it off. The other thing you can do is obviously down here where my brush is, you've got that white bit, just wet your paintbrush, okay, and just give it a little rub just to take those out, you know. Alright, me, I lick it, you know what I'm like. So there we go, we're just going to wet those off just down there, and obviously for argument's sake we're just going to pull it around and just get rid of those bits, just like that. Okay, so as those bits are all drying, what you can do then obviously is get your control sticks, your control columns and things like that in there. The seats, same thing, we might as well pop them in now. All I'm going to do is a little bit of grey paint for the cushions, pick out the harness, dry brush and do the lot, exactly the same thing, pretty straightforward. Now obviously in here we've done this black. Up the top here it has what I call yuck yellow, I'm sure it has got a proper name, it's yellow zinc chromate or whatever it is these days. Give that a good shake because I haven't used it in a while. Now I've still got some dry brushing of the silver on the brush here, so we're just going to be careful how we pick it up in the lid here. Okay, and all we're going to do is we're just going to brush on just a little bit. Okay, just on here. Now the reason for that is, looking at the photos, they are on the inside this yuck yellow zinc chromate colour. So that's what we're doing here. So obviously you're not really going to see it massively, it's just when you look in it's going to stick out. So we just do that edge. As I say, it doesn't have to be particularly good because it's one of those sorry things that you're never going to really see it. It's just you're going to get a hint of it from when you look down, but the base of it is black or your very dark green. There we go, just like that. Okay, so we've got those to be done. In some ways it would be lovely to rip this thing apart and actually to super detail it, and if I get time I'll do it, but unfortunately I haven't got a lot of time at the moment to actually do that, and I need somebody to commission me to do it as well. It'd be nice. But yeah, it's one of those types of kits where you could really go to work on it. Lots of scratch building you could do. You could literally spend a few months doing these because it's quite straightforward the way it all comes apart. You know, obviously you'd have to build all your internal bays and things, but it'd be one of those nice fun projects to do. But for this case, it's all out of the box. We're going to go through it and we're going to really concentrate, if you like, on how to weather a helicopter. Okay, so that's those bits done. What I've done is I've done the seats grey. When you look at the photos, they have a very funny pattern, which is like dots. It looks like a carbon fibre type of material. So what I've done is I've done grey, and I've got the dark wash on top. And when the dark wash is on there, I'm going to lightly brush it all around, and it will hopefully give a sort of, you know, a way of looking at it. And then the harnesses are all black, so we're going to do that. Quick little tip. Especially with your clear glosses, if you're on a Tamiya and you can't get the lid off completely, there's two things you can do. Firstly, stick it upside down in hot water, submerge it up to about halfway, and then the heat will help melt the bottom to get the top off. This one, like this is, okay, get a lump of blue tack, okay, wrap it round the outside, push it down on the top like so, okay, and then twist for your life. And there we go. You can get the lid off. But obviously the clear glosses do tend to be a bit nasty, for sometimes they weld themselves on there. But it's just a quick way of getting it off, otherwise you end up cutting your hands off and they turn bright red. Okay, so what we're doing in here is our usual thing we do for the screens. Tiny little bit of green, the clear green, okay, and we're just going to run to the edges and just obviously so it's bulging up the top. Okay, and we're just going to then drag it all the way around to the corners if you can. And then our final, grab a little bit more on your brush, don't totally overdo it, make a pool in the middle, and then let that flow out. So that's that one done. Obviously it's a bit more tricky with the front one because of the way the optics all work, and there isn't really anything going on down in there to do that one, so you don't really have to worry about it. But that's just a little quickie to do there. So what we've basically got then is the cockpit all done now, and it is all ready to be installed. Obviously we've got the control sticks which we're going to get in, and then we can get both halves together and let that, give it a couple of hours to start to dry before we start going near it, sanding and filling. So okay, if we just unmask the clear plate, there we go, which we got there. Obviously we've done that angled area, and then that's going to slip now down in between the actual glass area in here. It's going to be a tight fit, but it does go. So that sits in there like that, and that'll be there's a dividing screen, if you like, between the two, the armour plated screen. So that's that bit done. Now we could, obviously we're going to fix that with a tiny drop of gator glue. And the reason we're using gator glue is obviously because it's a clear part. We don't actually want to have any bits sticking to it or anything else like that. So what we'll do is, I think the best way is if we just take a little bit off the cocktail stick. Okay, we're just going to run a line along the bottom like that, and that way when it pushes down it will literally just push up into it. So that's that. And we'll just make sure we've got it the right way round, because obviously the armoured area and hopefully that'll dry all nice and clear and we'll all be okay. So that's that done. Right, okay, checking the references, and I have to thank Emma for sending me the book. Very, very handy. Got great details all the way through. And obviously the beauty with having a book like this, like the other reference books we've got, is that when you go through, it gives you fantastic, nice close-up shots of the gun. So when you're going around, you can actually think, well, you know, the gun's not exactly brilliant. Perhaps I could super detail it, you know, with a little bit of scratch building to make it a little bit more like it. But the great one with this one, as you can see, it's got fantastic detailed shots of all the engines, the bays, the things like that. And obviously for the cockpit work, you can see all the instrument panels, the dials, the layouts, exactly where they all are on it. As I say, thanks to Emma for this one. This one is the number 13 of the Lock-On Profile Guide, which is the Verlinden's product. Now, I'm not sure if it's still around, but you may be able to find it from usual sort of book outlets. Right, okay, so now we're into that position. As I say, we've got the seats done, so the seats can now go in. So we're just going to remove the blue tack off the back of them. Okay, so now it's time to bring both halves together. I've glued this one in. Now, I've just done a bit of a test fit. This here seems to be sloping down, so we need to pull it up, if you like, to get it to go into the groove on the other side. So it's a bit tricky to get it all to line up. Oh, look at that, I've done it the first time. Don't know how that happened, because obviously the other times I was doing it, it was a bit of a nightmare. So what I'm going to do, just to make sure we've got that good, we'll just pop that in there, and in that time I've just managed to knock off the instrument panel. So we're just going to get that back in position. Just before that totally dries. Well, I'll do that in 1 second. But what we're going to do, we're going to band this up. I'm going to go around with our liquid thin, and then at the same time as this is all drying, we can build all the subsections that bolt onto it, and then we can very carefully start to go around and try and get in there without making too much damage to that riveting. Okay, so we've got it all done up now. Now I've got a clamp just holding this front area together, band around the front and bands here, and I've held this rear area whilst it was gluing. So we're going to leave that now to completely go dry off to one side. In the meantime, obviously we can carry on and build the rotor head, which is pretty straightforward, and obviously you can make your decision on what type you're going to do. Then obviously you're going to have the millimeter radar on the top, which is that domey thing, or you're just going to have the normal. You can make your decisions on that. So we'll get those bits done next. Okay, well the great thing is, obviously when you're building a helicopter ascent, you can do lots of sub-assemblies. So what I've done whilst I've got things drying, we've got the engines together, obviously we've got the fan blades and everything to go on the front of that. Got the wings, the little stub wings on the side, they're done together. I've put the actual rotor head, started to get that together, and the bottom part's 4-piece that goes together. And then obviously it'll fit on top, something like that, which will take a bit of lining up. Quite a tricky one to put together is the tail rotor assembly, which are parts basically, what are we, B30, 31, and then you've got B14, 15, 13, and then 17 to put it all together. So you've actually got, what, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 parts in this little tiny thing here. So obviously it takes a bit of getting it all together, but there again, you basically got a spindle and they all drop over the top, so it's quite straightforward. So it's nothing really to get hard work there. Now, if we unband the front section, just take that off, and then obviously what we want to do is to go round and re-glue. We're going to watch that front windscreen again. I'm going to keep knocking it off. Okay, so what we're going to do is get all these bands off. Being a bit careful not to damage anything in the process. Let's just line those aerials all on the bottom. Okay, so what we want to do now is run more glue all the way along and make sure we've got a nice good seam, because obviously where the rubber bands are, you know, I tend to leave a small little gap. So obviously if we're going to sand and perhaps need any filler, we don't want any gaps in there. So we're just going to take our glue again and we're just going to run it quite a generous amount all along the seam lines, and we're going to let them re-seal because we've got lots to do. We can get on with lots of other bits and pieces whilst we're waiting for it all. Okay, so we're just making sure we're in absolutely everywhere, all down the back and anywhere where the rubber bands were. Now, as we've said before, we've got the trouble with the rivet lines, if you like, are these lovely rivets detail that are everywhere on there. But what we'll use is probably a needle and just give little tiny pokes, and obviously where it's pushing through you'll get that sort of volcano effect, a bit like when we do raised panel lines, we're using a sharp blade. Obviously it makes a trench but it pushes up, so hopefully you won't notice it that far all the way over. And what I'm hoping to do is a little bit of dry brushing with it. As you can hear, it's quite rough, just to lighten up those rivets and make them stand out a little bit more. Okay, so we've got that bit drying as well. Now basically at this point now it calls out for the undercarriage legs to go on, of which I've been cleaning up those parts so they can actually go on a moment, and we can get the actual electronics bays, which are the square rectangles that bolt on the side, so we can get those on.